I never thought my parents' first message to me in years would be this simple. We want to meet our granddaughter. On the surface, it sounded innocent, loving, even. But my hands were already shaking as I read it, because I knew exactly what they weren't saying. These were the same parents who told me they had no money when I begged for help with my student loans, then quietly poured their entire savings into my brother's business. The same business that crashed and burned, leaving him with nothing and me drowning in debt I'm still paying off. Now suddenly, after years of silence, missed birthdays, and carefully avoided conversations, they wanted back into my life. Into my daughter's life. I stared at my phone, my daughter sleeping peacefully in the next room, and realized something terrifying. If I let them in without telling the truth, I'd be betraying her the same way they betrayed me. So when we finally met, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I dropped one truth bomb, and everything changed. Growing up, I didn't need anyone to explain my place in the family. I learned it the way kids always do, by watching who got attention and who learned to stay quiet. My younger brother, Jason, was everything my parents loved to show off. He was loud, charming, and athletic. Coaches loved him. Teachers let things slide for him. And my parents? They revolved around him like planets caught in his gravity. Me? I was the good kid. The easy one. The one who didn't cause trouble. When Jason discovered sports, my dad lit up in a way I'd never seen before. He spent hours in the backyard throwing footballs, correcting Jason's stance, replaying his own high school glory days through his son. I remember sitting on the porch with a library book balanced on my knees, listening to them laugh and shout, pretending it didn't sting. My mom was subtler, but the message was the same. Jason's finger paintings went on the fridge, framed and admired. My straight-A report cards earned a distracted smile and a quick, "That's nice, Emily." Once, when I asked why she never hung my certificates up, she laughed softly and said, "You don't need praise. You're independent." Independent. That word followed me everywhere. When I was 10, I won first place at the school science fair. I came home clutching my blue ribbon like it was proof that I mattered. But my parents didn't even look up. Jason had just made the junior football team, and the living room was already decorated like a victory parade. I stood there for a full minute, ribbon in hand, before quietly walking back to my room. High school didn't change anything. I joined the debate team, the math club, anything that might earn me a moment in the spotlight. Jason became the star quarterback. Friday nights were for his games. My competitions were too academic, too boring, or always scheduled at inconvenient times. On graduation night, I was valedictorian. I'd practiced my speech for weeks. Standing on that stage, I scanned the crowd, heart racing, searching for my parents' faces. My mom was there, sort of half listening, half watching Jason joke with his friends. My dad was filming Jason entirely, laughing as if he were the one graduating. That was the night I understood something painful and permanent. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how perfect I tried to be, I would always come second. And the worst part? They never thought that was a problem. College was supposed to be my way out, my escape. I believed, naively, that if I worked hard enough, achieved enough, my parents would finally see me as worth investing in. When the acceptance letter arrived from a top university, I cried. I ran into the kitchen waving it like a winning lottery ticket. For a brief moment, I let myself hope. That night, my parents sat me down at the dining table. My dad cleared his throat. My mom folded her hands like she was about to deliver bad news to a stranger. "We can't help you with tuition," my dad said. "We just don't have the money." I remember nodding, swallowing the lump in my throat, telling them I understood. What else could I do? I signed the loan papers anyway. Tens of thousands of dollars in my name, before I was even 20. From that point on, my life became a blur of survival. I worked 2 part-time jobs during the semester, tutoring in the afternoons, shelving books in the library at night. During the summers, I took whatever shifts I could get, including overnight work at a greasy 24-hour diner. I'd come home smelling like fries and burnt coffee, collapse for 4 hours, then drag myself to class. There were nights I had to choose between buying textbooks or groceries. I learned how long a box of instant noodles could last if you pretended it was a meal plan. I told myself it was temporary. That one day, it would be worth it. Meanwhile, Jason's life followed a very different script. He decided college wasn't for him and took a job at a local auto shop. My parents shrugged it off like it was a charming personality quirk. He's living in the moment, my mom would say proudly, as if that explained everything. Jason spent his evenings at bars and parties. New clothes, new gadgets, weekend trips. And every time I visited home, I noticed my parents never asked him about savings, goals, or responsibility. Once, exhausted and bitter, I asked my mom why she never pushed him the way she pushed me. She smiled and said, "Jason needs support. You're strong. You'll be fine." I laughed along like it didn't hurt, but inside, something cracked. Because being strong didn't mean I didn't need help. It just meant I'd learned not to ask for it anymore. And at the time, I still believed the lie that my parents truly didn't have the money. I had no idea how wrong I was. I found out the truth during my senior year of college, and it wasn't some dramatic confession or tearful apology. It slipped out casually, the way the most devastating information often does. I was home for a weekend, sitting at the kitchen counter, half asleep from another overnight shift. My parents were buzzing with excitement, talking over each other in that familiar, animated way they only ever used for one person. "Jason finally did it," my dad said, grinning. "He's opening his own auto repair shop." I smiled weakly. "That's great. How's he paying for it?" They exchanged a glance. My mom answered, cheerful and proud. "We're helping him get started. We gave him our savings." I remember the room going strangely quiet, like all the air had been sucked out at once. "Your savings," I repeated. "What savings?" "The ones you said didn't exist," I wanted to scream. "The ones you told me were gone when I was signing loan papers at 18. My dad waved a hand dismissively. "It's complicated." "No," I said, my voice shaking now. "It's not. You told me you couldn't help me with college because you didn't have money." My mom frowned, like I was being unreasonable. That was different. Different. That single word burned. They explained it to me like I was a child who simply didn't understand how the world worked. Jason needed the money more. He didn't have a degree. He didn't have options. I did. I was smart. I was ambitious. I'd make good money one day. "You'll be fine," my dad said again. The same words. Always the same words. I felt sick. I thought about the nights I'd cried in my dorm room, staring at my bank balance. The times I'd skipped meals. The laptop I sold, my grandmother's graduation gift, to afford textbooks. The exhaustion that never quite went away. And all along they had the money. They just didn't think I deserved it. I asked them if they had any idea what my student loan balance looked like. If they understood the interest piling up. The stress. The fear of one emergency ruining everything. My dad sighed, clearly irritated. "Emily, you're turning this into a bigger deal than it needs to be." That was the moment something inside me finally snapped into place. This wasn't ignorance. This wasn't bad timing. This was a choice. They chose Jason. Over and over again. And they chose to let me struggle because it was easier for them to believe I could handle it. I didn't yell. I didn't cry in front of them. I just nodded, stood up, and went to my old bedroom. I sat on the bed and stared at the wall, feeling something cold and heavy settle in my chest. That night, I made a decision I never said out loud. I would finish my degree. I would build a life without their help. And once I did, I would never put myself in a position where they could hurt me like this again. I finished my degree with a smile on my face and a wall around my heart. From the outside, it probably looked like nothing had changed. I still came home for major holidays. I still answered their calls, briefly, carefully. But the daughter, who once hoped for their approval, was gone. In her place was someone quieter, guarded, and very tired of being disappointed. I threw myself into my career with a kind of desperation. If I couldn't rely on my family, then I would rely on myself. Long hours. Relentless focus. No room for mistakes. I told myself I was chasing success, but really, I was running from the feeling of being unwanted. That was when I met Daniel. He wasn't flashy or loud like my brother. He listened. Really listened. The first time I tried to brush off my family issues with a joke, he gently stopped me and said, "You don't have to minimize this for me." No one had ever said that to me before. With Daniel, I felt seen in a way that didn't depend on achievements or resilience. When I told him about my parents, about the loans, about the money they'd given Jason, he didn't try to justify them or tell me to be the bigger person. He just said, "That wasn't fair. And you didn't deserve it." We got married quietly. No big family celebration. No forced smiles. Just us. When I became pregnant with Sophie, something shifted inside me. Holding her for the first time, I felt a wave of protectiveness, so strong it almost scared me. She was tiny and fragile, trusting the world completely. And I made myself a promise right there in the hospital room. My daughter would never have to earn my love. She would never be told she was strong as an excuse to abandon her. She would never grow up wondering why she wasn't enough. We moved forward without my parents. New routines. New traditions. Sophie's birthdays were loud and messy and full of laughter. No awkward phone calls. No guilt-laced cards. Just peace. And for a long time, that peace felt permanent. Until one afternoon, years later, my phone buzzed with a message I never expected to see again. It was from my mother. "We've been thinking," she wrote. "We'd really love to meet our granddaughter." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding, because I knew this wasn't just a request. It was the past knocking on my door. And this time, I had everything to lose. I didn't reply to my mother's message right away. I read it, locked my phone, then unlocked it again minutes later like it might somehow change. "We'd really love to meet our granddaughter." The words felt rehearsed. Polite. Almost strategic. That night, after Sophie was asleep, I showed the message to Daniel. He didn't tell me what to do. He never does. He just asked one question that cut straight through my confusion. Why now? I didn't have an answer yet, but I would soon. A few days later, my mom called. She sounded fragile. Her voice trembled in a way I didn't recognize, and for a split second, the old instinct kicked in. The instinct to comfort. To fix. "Emily," she said softly, "things have been really hard lately." That was when the truth started to spill out. Jason's business had failed. Completely. Not just a slow decline, total collapse. Bad decisions. Poor planning. Debts he couldn't cover. My parents had stepped in, again, trying to save him. They drained what little they had left. Taken out loans. Even talked about refinancing the house. As she spoke, my chest tightened. Not because I was surprised, but because I finally understood the timing. Now they needed something. And suddenly I existed again. My dad took over the call at one point, his voice heavy with forced optimism. He told me how proud he was of the life I'd built. How impressive my career was. How strong I'd always been. There it was. That word again. Strong. They asked about Sophie, what she liked, how old she was, whether she looked like me. My mom laughed nervously and said, "We've missed so much." I almost asked her how you miss something you never tried to be part of. Almost. Instead, I listened. And the more they talked, the clearer it became. This wasn't about reconnecting out of love or regret. This was about control. About access. About attaching themselves to the one child who hadn't fallen apart. When they finally asked if we could meet in person, my heart pounded so hard I thought they could hear it through the phone. I said yes. Not because I trusted them. Not because I'd forgiven them. But because I needed to look them in the eye and say the things I'd swallowed for years. After I hung up, I went into Sophie's room and watched her sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling. I imagined my parents holding her, smiling, playing the role of loving grandparents. And a cold thought settled in my mind. If I didn't draw a line now, they would cross it, the same way they always had. So I agreed to meet them. On my terms. And I already knew this conversation wouldn't end quietly. We met at a small cafe halfway between their town and mine. Neutral ground. Public. Safe. I told Daniel I wanted to do this alone, not because I was brave, but because I needed to know I could stand on my own feet when it mattered. I arrived early and chose a table in the corner. My hands were wrapped around a mug I hadn't touched, my heart racing like it already knew what was coming. They walked in together. Older. Smaller. My mom's hair was completely gray now, and my dad's shoulders were slightly hunched, like the weight of everything he'd refused to face had finally settled in. For a moment, none of us spoke. Then my mom rushed forward and hugged me. I stiffened. The embrace felt unfamiliar, almost invasive. She smelled the same, lavender and something sweet, and that made it worse. My dad hovered awkwardly, hands in his pockets, eyes darting around the cafe. Saturday, I'll start, my mom said quickly, as if afraid I'd stop her. We know we made mistakes. Mistakes. I bit the inside of my cheek. She talked about regret, about how proud they were of me, about how hard the past few years had been with Jason.
She cried.
My dad nodded along, adding the occasional, "We didn't realize," or "We did the best we could." When they finally paused, my dad leaned forward. "We just want to be a family again." I stared at him for a long moment. 8 years of silence. Decades of favoritism. And now, suddenly, family. I took a deep breath. "You want honesty?" I asked quietly. They both nodded.
So I gave it to them.
I told them about the nights I sat on my dorm room floor crying because I couldn't afford groceries. About working double shifts while Jason partied, funded by the same money they told me didn't exist. About selling my grandmother's laptop just to buy textbooks. My mom whispered my name, tears streaming down her face. I didn't stop. I told them how invisible I felt growing up. How every achievement had to be perfect just to earn a distracted smile. How being labeled strong became a curse, an excuse for them to abandon me emotionally and financially. My dad tried to interrupt. "Emily, that's not." "No," I said sharply, cutting him off for the first time in my life. "You don't get to explain this away." The words surprised all of us, especially me. I leaned forward, my voice steady now. "You didn't forget me. You chose Jason. Over and over again. And you taught me something very clearly. My value to you depended on what I could handle without help." The cafe seemed to fade away. I was barely aware of the other people around us, the clinking cups, the soft music. All I could see were their faces, pale, shaken. Then I dropped the truth bomb. "You don't want to meet my daughter because you love her," I said. "You want access to her because Jason needs saving again." The silence was instant and crushing. My mom's mouth opened, then closed. My dad froze, his jaw tightening. "That's not fair," he finally said. "It's exactly fair," I replied. "You didn't call when she was born. You didn't ask how I was surviving new motherhood. You didn't send a card or a text or even an apology." I swallowed hard. But the moment Jason's life fell apart suddenly, you remembered I exist. My mom started sobbing. "We just want to make things right." "Then stop trying to use my child as a reset button," I said. I told them the rules. Slowly. Clearly. They would not meet Sophie until I decided they'd earned that privilege. I would not give Jason money. Ever. Not as an investment. Not as a loan. Not as family support. And if they tried to guilt me, manipulate me, or pressure me, even once, I would walk away again.
Permanently.
My dad looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 minutes. "We didn't know how much we hurt you." I stood up, my legs shaking but my voice calm. "That's the thing. You didn't want to know." I paid for my coffee and slipped on my coat. My mom reached for my hand, then stopped herself. As I walked out, the door chimed softly behind me. Outside, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel, replaying every word. I felt raw, exposed. But underneath it all, there was something else. Relief. For the first time in my life, I hadn't begged to be chosen. I'd chosen myself. For a few weeks after that meeting, everything was quiet. Too quiet. My parents respected the boundaries, at least on the surface. My mom sent one short text saying she needed time to process everything. My dad didn't reach out at all. I told myself maybe the truth had finally sunk in. Maybe this time, things would actually be different. Then the email arrived. It was from Jason. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" My stomach dropped before I even opened it. The message was long, rambling, and filled with the kind of apologies that never quite take responsibility for anything. He wrote about how he'd messed up, how life had been unfair, how he was trying to turn things around. And then he got to the point. He had a new idea. A better idea. A sure thing. He wanted me to invest. As I read, my hands started shaking, not with sadness, but with anger so sharp it made my vision blur. The business plan was vague. Buzzwords. Promises. Nothing concrete. It was painfully obvious he hadn't learned a single lesson from the last disaster. What hurt most wasn't the ask itself. It was the assumption. After everything. After years of silence. After watching me struggle while he was protected from consequences, he still saw me as a backup plan. A wallet. A solution. I didn't respond to Jason. Instead, I called my parents. They didn't deny it. In fact, my mom admitted they'd encouraged him to reach out. "We thought it might help you reconnect," she said softly. "Bring the family together." Something inside me went cold. "You heard everything I said," I told them. "And you still did this." My dad grew defensive. "He's your brother." "And Sophie is my daughter," I snapped. "And you are willing to risk her future for his next mistake." That was the moment I knew. Nothing fundamental had changed. They hadn't respected my boundaries, they'd tested them. Pushed them. The same pattern, just dressed up as reconciliation. I ended the call shaking, my chest tight, tears burning behind my eyes. Daniel held me while I cried. Not because I missed them, but because I was grieving the hope I'd briefly allowed myself to have. The next morning, I sent a single email. I told my parents I needed space. Real space. No calls. No messages. No updates about Jason. I made it clear that any future relationship would depend entirely on their ability to respect my limits, without exceptions. Then, I blocked Jason. It hurt, but not as much as letting them keep crossing lines would have. For the first time, walking away didn't feel like running. It felt like protecting everything I'd built. Time has a way of softening the sharpest edges, not by erasing what happened, but by putting it into perspective. In the months after I stepped back, life slowly returned to its normal rhythm. Work was busy.
Exhausting.
Fulfilling. Sophie started talking in full sentences, asking endless questions, laughing at her own jokes. Every night when I tucked her into bed, I was reminded why I'd drawn those boundaries in the first place. One evening, as I was reading her favorite bedtime story, she wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, "I love you, Mommy." Something inside me finally settled. I realized I no longer needed my parents to understand my pain in order for it to be real. Daniel and I talked often about family, about what we wanted Sophie to grow up believing. We agreed on one thing above all else. Love should never feel conditional. It shouldn't be something you earn by being strong, quiet, or convenient. My parents eventually sent one last message.
Short.
Careful. Saying they respected my decision and would wait until I was ready. I didn't reply. Not because I was angry, but because I finally understood that silence can be an answer, too. I don't know what the future holds. Maybe one day, there will be cautious conversations. Maybe there won't. I've stopped trying to predict it. What I do know is this. I broke a cycle. My daughter will grow up knowing she is chosen, every single day. Not because she fixes anyone's mistakes. Not because she carries anyone's expectations. But simply because she is loved. And that truth? That's the only legacy I care about leaving behind.